All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of Athletics for Life podcast. We're your hosts, Jeff and CD, a couple of athletic directors in Mongolia. And we like to spend our time interviewing interesting people in the world of sports. This year, we have primarily been focused on athletic directors in Asia, trying to hit as many countries as possible in and around Asia. And today is no exception. So Jeff, why don't you go ahead and introduce today's guests.
I will do both, CD, introduce and interview. Now, great. We've been all over the place. And today we're going to Laos. We're going to the Vientiane International School. And we're going to talk to Matt Lautenbach. Matt was originally the athletics director, but his role has changed. And now his title is the director of holistic learning. And he will talk more about that transition, how it came to that new role. And we're very happy to have Matt on the podcast today. We've been talking back and forth a little while to find a time, and we finally have him on for him to share about his new role, and maybe for other ADs watching, see, hey, how can I improve or go to a different position? So we hope you enjoy the podcast with Matt today.
Enjoy. Let's go to Laos. All right, we're sitting down with Matt. Matt, why don't we just kick it off? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at in the world, and kind of how you got there.
Certainly. So Matt Lautenbach, I am the Director of Holistic Learning at the Vientiane International School. A change in title, and I'm sure we'll get into that as we go, but previous stops as an aquatics director in Beijing and in Cairo. Quite a bit of time spent coaching swimming as head coach and in various other roles in the United States. Originally from Michigan, lived in Oregon for a while, met my wife in Beijing, and we're now back overseas and living in Laos.
Very cool. So your background is swimming. Is that correct? Is that how you rolled into this position?
Absolutely. So my background is swimming, and it remains a huge love of mine. Love the coaching aspect, love the organization aspect. And through that, in aquatics programs in international schools, they almost function as full athletic programs in some ways. In Cairo, it was a school of roughly 800 students. And after school, before school, we had roughly 245, 250 students roll through the aquatics program, whether that be learn to swim programs, competitive swimming from first grade all the way up through grade 12. We had a water polo program there. It really was a mini athletics program. And that experience running that really kind of drew me to being an athletics director. I had a colleague of mine in Cairo that was doing the athletics and administration master's through Endicott College, and she talked me into doing that. And so that really set this path towards athletics in motion. But my love will always be swimming and supporting the work that our swimmers do and trying to kind of build that community in addition to the work that I'm doing within whichever school it is I'm working at.
Sure. I see here just in some of our chats beforehand that you spent some time building up the International School Aquatics Network.
It's true.
What is that, and kind of what was some of the work that you did to build that up?
Yeah, so we had some very hardworking athletes in Cairo, and they happened to be pretty quick. So International School Aquatics came out of the fact that of the international sports, comparing performances is far and away the easiest in swimming. A 25-meter pool is the same whether it's indoors, whether it's outdoors, whether it's in Hungary, whether it's in Egypt, whether it's in China. And so I spent some time just gathering data. I had worked in Asia before. I knew that there were some fast swimmers there. The league that we were a part of in Cairo, the ISST, like that was a very fast meet. So I was taking that data and running rankings, essentially event rankings and team rankings. So for a few years there before COVID hit, I was crowning a mythical world champion. UWC East in Singapore was the first 2 years. And then it was the International School of Beijing in the third year before we got derailed from COVID. But it came from a desire to see the hard work that the coaches were putting in around the world, to see the hard work that the athletes were putting into the world, and kind of put them at a ranking. I struggle with rankings for some of our younger athletes, but we have had so many kids that have gone through international school athletics, and especially aquatics, that have gone on to careers either internationally or collegiately in the United States. And so the idea behind International School Aquatics kind of came out of a place of trying to get a little bit more recognition, to get some understanding of where performances were in terms of the world. Again, in Cairo, we kind of knew we were pretty good. We were runners up in ISST my first year. We were champions the second year, but it's still like, that's a very small corner of the world. It was 16 schools doing that. And I knew that there were similar people working hard all over, and I was curious how that was. So it was a lot of time spent just with raw data, pulling the meet results, collating them into spreadsheets, and then scoring them. It comes from the United States. NISCA, the National Interscholastic Swim Coaches Association, put together all-American rankings for each of the events in the US. They also, in conjunction with Swimming World Magazine, do a mythical national champion. So that's where that idea came from. It started out purely as a year-by-year ranking, so that I wasn't doing that as my full-time job. I had some limitations around that. It had to be at a multinational conference championship. It couldn't be at any other meet, kind of limiting the pool of places that I was taking those results from. But what it grew into was a chance to look at the record holders. And we've had a number of Olympians that have gone to school at international schools, and recognizing their achievements. And then COVID hit, and like all of our programs, it kind of stopped. The international conference meets weren't happening anymore. But I had built up this network that was keen on keeping something going. So last year we ran 2 virtual competitions, attended by, I think the first one we hit 20 schools. The second one was a bit fewer, but it was done in conjunction with the Asian All-Stars meet that Nick Wilson at the International School of Beijing has put on. So Nick and I kind of worked together to kind of turn it more international, more worldwide. And I think we had 18 or 19 schools put in results for that. And then the other awesome thing that happened last year was that I ran a virtual conference for anybody that was interested. I had seven presentations from aquatics professionals around the world on their choice of topics, and we had 100 participants that showed up for a weekend learning on Zoom. And it was a great way to end the year. It was our hope at that time that it was ending the year and ending the time of COVID, if you will. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And this is unique to our circumstance here in Laos, but when we got back into the country after a much needed summer break, we were planning for students to be on campus. And we were planning for students to be on campus. And the Friday before we were scheduled to have students on campus, we were ready for students to be on campus. On Saturday at about noon, we found out from the Ministry of Education that we were not going to be able to have students on campus. And so, unfortunately, our context here has had aquatics kind of move away. It's the only sport that we've been able to bring back this year, but that was just in the last 6 or 7 weeks. We haven't been able to run a full program. Our practices are we've needed to watch our numbers a lot closer. So we haven't been able to even bring back that program in the way that we had. And as a result, International School Aquatics, it has not gone away. I've worked with Stephen in Oman on a virtual meet that he put on, but I kind of helped him a little bit with collating some of the results. But we're waiting for those international conference meets to come back and kind of get a reboot at that point of internationalschoolaquatics.com.
Nice. Yeah, so it's actually one of the sports that we could do during COVID times is swimming, which we've done a swim meet, we've done some cross-country stuff. I just got an email from Akamis that they want to do a virtual swim, which is awesome. So we have a few swimmers. So that's great. To talk, you said holistic learning. Can you talk a little bit about your role and how has it changed over the time?
Yeah, so as I was just talking about, our athletics and activities program has been derailed. And it's a shame. I think our kids are really missing that, but it has afforded me the opportunity to kind of take some of the things that I was doing with athletics and activities and shift them into a completely new arena. And it started really way back in 2020, and it doesn't necessarily some days feel like it's way back, but here in Laos, we have been incredibly fortunate in that we haven't had severe outbreaks of COVID yet. But from purely an educational standpoint, we have felt that the government has taken a very firm hand on some of the regulations. And that's interrupted what we are able to do. I think it has shown that their approach has been largely effective, given that we haven't had those large outbreaks, but it has certainly meant that life is not the same as it was before COVID. In terms of travel, we are still not to a point where people can freely enter the country. It takes a significant amount of paperwork from our HR department for us to leave the country, even on extended holidays. So it's forced a shift. And obviously COVID has forced a shift in all of us. Going back to 2020, my wife, my son, and I were at the airport ready to leave the country, and because of her passport status, she wasn't allowed onto the flight. We were going to go back to the United States, and while that was incredibly devastating in the moment, it turned out to be an incredible opportunity. Being here in the country when a number of members of our leadership team were able to go back to their home countries opened up that opportunity for me to take some of my experiences, take some of my knowledge, and apply them in a completely different way. It's something that we ask our learners to do all the time. It's something that we're hopefully training our athletes to do all the time. And it's been great to put that into practice. Over the last school year, not this current one, but last year, so the 2020-2021 school year, we undertook a school-wide project to redefine how we use time for learning. And with the flexibility that not having a full athletics and activities program offered, I led the task force that worked on that. Functionally, and it's fancy words for saying we redid our timetable, but we really took a complete look at how we can use time. One big part of that project was that we had early release for our students to do professional learning on Wednesday afternoons. We took that Wednesday day and we've had it be completely off timetable. We have 2 hours and 15 minutes for project-based learning. We have a well-being time carved out for an hour, and we have a time of 1 hour to build community. As I was part of the team, as I helped lead the team that came up with the timetable, it's a significant chunk of the week that needed some coordination, that needed some leadership around it. Some of that is very practical. Who goes where, when? Some of it is a little bit more curricular based or learning based. And that's where the shift from athletics and activities to more of a holistic approach to the student development came. So I've taken on the role of leading the programming for that time. I have 3 tremendous coordinators that are in charge of the programming for particular blocks of that time, but I kind of take the high level lens. I work on the organization bit of it. I work on the scheduling bits of that. In addition, we are at the stage where we are in our reaccreditation phase with CIS, WASC, and the IB. And so I had that little bit of additional bandwidth, a lot of additional bandwidth, to coordinate that project with the school. So the title is still kind of being defined. We were given the opportunity by CIS and WASC to do their Pathway 2 for reaccreditation. So instead of a normal self-study process where we have to do reports and have meetings, we have chosen one of their domains to do a deep dive into, and that deep dive is into well-being. So it fits incredibly nicely with some of the changes that we've made in our schedule. It allows us to continue what we call our destiny plans, our roadmap, which is our future planning for these programs. But it honors the fact that in this time of significant change in the world, we have carved out this space to really focus deeply on social emotional learning, on student well-being. And that is through athletics. It is through activities. It is through project-based learning. And so I'm not just in charge of this window of time before and after school where we will bring back activities at some date, but it is looking at, I have some influence and some leadership and some support that I can offer in the development of the holistic being. So I don't know if we knew that the title would be as good of a fit when my head of school, Elsa Donahue, and I were coming up with it, but it has turned into be a remarkable encapsulation of all of the different areas that I've become involved in since this change and since we had this interruption to our athletics and activities program.
That's it's really intriguing. Often in these interviews, I get some idea or somebody's doing something at their program, and like any good educator, I steal it and I want to use it for myself. So I'm just thinking, if I were to go to my admin and say, like, we have early release on Mondays, and I were to say, hey, I just talked to this guy, he's doing this amazing thing, we need to take Mondays off the timetable. I can only imagine the response I would get. So I'm just curious on how you overcame some of the challenges that an administration or even parents might come up with of, are you getting enough time in English and science and maths? How is it going to be organized so it's not just 2 hours of free time, those sort of things. I'm just curious on what are some of the hurdles that you face and how did you overcome them so that way it is a valuable use of your time and you are getting something meaningful out of it.
Absolutely. So I think tying it into existing plans and existing programs as much as possible is a great way to help alleviate some of that. But honestly, it became a godsend that we had COVID. I was sharing the story of the fact that we found out the Saturday before we were meant to start on Monday that we were online. Well, any pushback after 4 months of the parents having the kids at home, any pushback around that kind of went out the window once we were finally able to have the kids on campus. Like, that was never our intention. We felt so strongly about the need to inspire, challenge, empower. They live in our VIS core, but those words mean so much that was a time to do that with our students. When we looked at the timetable, we referenced into our core, into our mission, into our vision, into our values at every step of the way. And we absolutely had some parents that did have some questions around that, but showing them the need for a different approach to education. The idea that if anything that came out of the pandemic is that we can't do things the exact same way before, and kind of turning it around as well. The regimented timetable of a student. I don't know about you guys, but that doesn't represent the way that I work. It's not accurate to what the real life experience is. I have chunks of time where I need to be directing myself, that I can pursue something that I am interested in that may not be completely tied into my particular responsibilities. So I think working along and trying to think outside of the way that things have happened in the past has been an incredible benefit. We also are incredibly fortunate to have a very supportive parent community here in Vientiane. I've had a very supportive parent community everywhere that I have worked, but at the same time, I have had a parent community that may need a little bit more guidance, that have a particular expectation of the way things that are going to be. And what I have found here is that the parent community is, the word that I have is permissive, and I don't like that. Like, it's not quite the right fit, but trusting is probably a great one. The school has done amazing work to build up that trust with the community, that the decisions that we are making are done with student learning and student well-being at their heart, and that we are not doing things that would derail that. It may look a little bit different, but tied into our mission, tied into our vision, tied into our values, things that as parents you have subscribed to when you chose to send your students to here. This is what informs our decisions. And keeping that at the heart, I think, is something that I will take with me far past this experience, because if done through that lens, we are on the right track, even if it's a challenging conversation.
Great. Yeah, parents are so important. And as you know, like you said, we talked to so many ADs, Matt, and this COVID has showed us so many creativity things they've been doing is just remarkable. I want to talk a little bit about you. So when you got to know that you had to change your job, how was that for you? And what kind of skills do you say are transferable between the AD role and the role you're having right now? You mentioned a few already, like creativity, adaptability. Is this something that you are pursuing, going to the administration, or would you like to go back into athletics in the future?
I'm going to answer that last bit first. Both. I think that I still have athletics and activities are my entry. I will always have a love for our student athletes that are trying to explore, trying to be excellent at a chosen activity. I think there is a great opportunity to continue to add value to any school community that I am a part of through athletics and activities. At the same time, this experience has shown me that I do have an interest in whole school administration, that I think, to jump to the beginning of your question, that's a transferable skill that athletics and activities people have. They look at things through a wider lens. We have a great senior leadership team here, but nonetheless, there are meetings that I am a part of that the primary principal looks at things through what they are living, through the primary lens. Our secondary principal does the same thing. I think being just slightly removed from that it's a great opportunity to really add value to your school community by looking at a bigger picture. It's not one domain, but it has impacts across. One of the huge changes, and it's going to make my job when we do bring athletics and activities back miserable, but one of the huge changes that we made is that in a school of 450 students, we have a staggered start time. Our primary school starts an hour before our secondary school. We know that our older students need a little bit more sleep. They stay up later doing homework. So we've been able to shift them an hour later. But what that means is that they are still using our facilities for an hour when we need those facilities to run activities in athletics. And so that's another thing that I think athletics directors, activities directors bring. It's that we all, to be successful, I believe that we all need to be incredibly organized. We need to look at a practice schedule and understand that these are the stakeholders that need access to the pitch at this time. These are the people that need to be in the gym. How do we balance those things? And that is a lens that it's really found a place here at VIS over the last couple of years. It's looking at those competing interests and just kind of being able to, there's a reason I've been instrumental in helping build the timetable. When my mind sees the spaces and the times, like it just kind of fits. It's like a tournament. You know the bracket, it just kind of fits. So I think that's one area. It has not always been my favorite thing to be involved in the negotiation over who teaches what and who teaches where. But I think that is a transferable thing from the athletics and activities world. We are constantly juggling those spaces, constantly juggling what can be offered, availability, who's doing what when, and making sure you offer those opportunities for as wide a range of students as possible has been something that's come through. To be honest, I wasn't asked to change my job. It was recognized and honored that I had these transferable skills that could benefit other parts of the organization. And I largely hid, not on purpose, but the first month that we were living in this, I wasn't busy. I didn't have that. And it's full credit to Elsa that she recognized that fact and found areas where I can contribute. And it's been awesome. Like, it's been so great to learn different parts of the school. It really has opened up a whole new career possibility. And that's not to close the door on athletics and activities at all. Huge love for this role. And I hope to be able to live a little bit more normally next year. I hope that we can have our athletics and activities program. But the other areas where I've been able to contribute to the community aren't going away. COVID planning. There's a lens that we bring working with outside providers, working with protocols, working with tournament preparations that allows us to be more responsive in times of stress. And I think that has paid off in COVID planning. We've undertaken a giant building project. So again, it's another one of those places. Thank goodness for COVID, because we have significantly limited facility spaces right now, but it's offered these opportunities. And I would encourage all ADs to look at that. There is so much that you can bring that we are all busy in our own different way. We all have those stresses, but when it comes down to crunch time, if you can offer a little bit of something that helps out the school as a whole, which of course we do within our domain, but looking for those transferable opportunities, I think it really shows our value. And I think as schools, I mean, I'm incredibly grateful that one, I have kept a job, and two, we haven't had any pay cuts. And I know we have colleagues around the world that at some schools, that's not the case, that there have been cuts. But looking for those opportunities to contribute as widely as possible, I think shows your value to the community.
Definitely. You hit on so many things that are so true with athletic directors, like just being able to see a tournament and how it's all going to fit together. Just a quick aside, I participated in a couple of Mongolian tournaments, and they'll schedule like 36 games to happen before 7 p.m. and like, well, one game takes 20 minutes and there's a little bit of time between each game. Like we're going to be here till 2 a.m. And everyone, no, we'll be done. 2 a.m. is the final game. And then we repeat it all the next day. And just those little things that we take for granted as ADs that we look at all the time as far as like who's going to be where, just like you said, are definitely transferable skills. I'm interested, you mentioned next year a little bit. At the time of recording, we're in early May, so most schools have a month and a half left. What does next year look like for you? What are you hoping for? What are you anticipating? And what are some of your goals as you wrap up this year and get excited for next year?
I think the number one goal is to have a program, bring back athletics, and we're part of the Marissa League, the Mekong River International School Association, with schools from Vietnam, from Thailand, from Cambodia, and from Laos. And we're in talks to bring back our tournaments, but we don't know. Southeast Asia, along with much of East Asia, has taken a more rigid approach to bringing back travel. We're planning for those tournaments, but even if that doesn't happen, I think we can build something locally. There seems to be that momentum to get life back to some semblance of what it looked like back in 2019 here within Vientiane. Our local league has always been strong in terms of developing us for those international tournaments, but our focus has always been on the Marissa tournaments. I could see that changing next year, a little bit more of a balance. We made the decision last school year when we were able to have practices not to be a largely active participant within that league. I see that going back the other way and us rejoining that and trying to build on whatever opportunities we have. We hope they involve international travel, but if not, bringing back that program. And frankly, that's the goal right now. We are planning for that. This is every day that we have students on campus. This is the latest in the year in 3 years that we have had students on campus. So we're feeling good. We're thrilled that our diploma program students are able to sit their exams. That was very touch and go for lots of moments over the last year. So it really is kind of forward thinking with that lens of what both normal is and what the new normal can be. So we are starting to put together our rotations. We are starting to put together a sketch over where activities can live within our campus. And we expect to come back to somewhat largely resembling 2019, 2020.
Yeah, so I think we're all planning next year as normal, but in the back of our minds, we all think it might not happen again. So what do we do next? And a lot of these ADs too, Matt, they were talking about doing things locally. And we've been focusing hard here in Mongolia to get more and more schools involved locally, because that's what we can control, and travel we cannot, and we don't want to get stuck somewhere, and when COVID goes again and we get stuck in a foreign country. So yeah, that sounds very similar. I'm actually curious, now you're in your new role, looking ahead, what kind of personal development are you doing to grow in your position? Or do you do more athletics specific PD or more administration PD? What do you do to keep yourself up to date educational wise?
Both, all. I am a passionate lifelong learner, and I'm always looking for opportunities to grow my knowledge and grow the areas where that can be applied. Last summer, I took a couple of courses through the PTC, which have been fantastic, transformational. I have focused a little bit more on personal growth this year, and I'm training for a half Ironman this summer. So I'm not doing any courses this summer, but in the course of a week, I'll dig deep into some articles around social emotional learning curriculum and how that can be applied more school-wide. The next week, it might be timetabling. a lot less formal opportunities. We are on a tight PD budget, and so looking to grow my knowledge through reading research articles. Like schools all over the world, we are starting to grapple with the difficult conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And I think that the lens of athletics, it's caused me to do a lot of reflection in a school community that is about 50% Asian, about 35% Lao. All of the sports that we sponsor are popular in the West. They are not necessarily popular within our local context. So that's an area that I continue to do some work on. I don't necessarily see any league changes being made in the near term for that, but looking at opportunities to build the program. And that has the very nice tie-in to the CIS work that we are doing. We are doing 5 projects. One is pretty boring, it's handbooks, but that lives in the athletics world because it's health and safety, it's child safeguarding. That's a big part of what we do. So that's one of it. We're developing a whole school well-being curriculum. We have a teaching and learning project that is largely centered around the universal design for learning, which, as we look at building our teams, has an application to athletics. How do we make sure that we are as inclusive as we can be to our athletes, that we aren't turning away potential stars down the road one day because they don't have the same preparation? So kind of using that lens to rethink how we do teams. The Changing the Game project is a huge inspiration of mine, and I've had ideas about small-sided tournaments and things like that to kind of build that, especially at the primary level. And then the other project is that DEIJ work. So kind of, yes, it is whole school work, but it has an application for what we are doing here. So that's where a lot of my reading, learning, and thinking has happened over this year.
Yeah, that's the hard part, is trying to stay active in everything. And when you're taking on a new role like that, it often ends up being, okay, what do I need to get done next? Let's figure out how to do that and do it the best that I can, and then implement what I'm learning. And sometimes that's the best way to go about it. That's the best way to learn, is you figure it out and then you try it. But like you said, COVID's kind of been this blessing in disguise where we can try new things and we get the reset button. We're nearing the end. We've got a couple questions left for you, Matt. What tips would you have for maybe new ADs or somebody like yourself who's in a role and that role is changing? What tips would you have for somebody so that they can be successful?
Counterintuitive, but say yes and say no. Look for opportunities, say yes. Put your hand up, be willing to try things. You don't necessarily need to have experience in something to do a good job at them. At the same time, once you start down that road, it's really easy to keep saying yes. Be willing to say no. And that's what this summer is about. Yes, I have my own pursuits, but I'm really looking forward to that time, kind of what you were just saying, that it has been a constant kind of reinvention and learning on the job. We need some time away from that as well. You need those breaks. I don't know if I could have been as successful this year if we were still having tournaments and activities that often happen on Saturdays. For probably the only time in my career, my weekends have been relatively my own. In this year, I'm used to having practice, at the very least practice on Saturday, oftentimes a tournament on Saturday, sometimes a tournament on Saturday and Sunday. With all of that going away, I work incredibly hard 5 days a week, but I have been able to protect my weekends a little bit more than I would at another time. I think that's allowed for that growth, and I'm looking forward to this summer. So it's important to be able to say no, to have a clear kind of line. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes I do get, yeah, you're saying no, but it really does need to be done. But that's okay. Like, say yes to opportunities, but also carve out that time for reflection and some self-care.
That's so hard saying no as the AD in our roles. I never say no, but I should sometimes. How do you do that? When do you know to say no? How do you do that?
Yeah, I don't have
Just
an answer for that. Hopefully it's before it's really clear that you needed to say no a while ago, because you're at the point where it must happen. But I think having a excellent, trusting relationship with your supervisor, with your fellow leadership team, I think that's been a big part of it. And we school-wide have kind of worked, and I think we still are on the road to success, but we have kind of tried to work out. We have agreements that emails should not be sent over the weekend or holidays. That oftentimes leads to some schedule sends that my inbox does fill up at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday, but nonetheless, like it allows for that little thing. So I think, again, as ADs, we're really good thinking systematically, like trying to set up the systems that protects bits of time, whether that's building in a Friday afternoon chunk or whatever the day may be, but a chunk of time that lives on your calendar that, if push comes to shove, it can be a meeting time with somebody, but it's kind of protected time to get the little stuff done. I have a lifeguard I need to schedule. I have timesheets I need to fill out. That falls into that Friday time. I know it can get exchanged for something, but it's pretty sacred on my calendar.
Yeah, that's so important. I had actually this week, Matt, I was training in a gym in the morning, and we don't have much time, right? So the time that I have is valuable. And this colleague comes in with a question. I politely told him, said, sorry, but this is my time. Please respect that. I've worked the whole weekend. And he was very cool with that, but we have to make it clear. Sometimes we need our time. In the beginning of the podcast, in this interview, you talked about Endicott and then your master. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I've read about it, and maybe it might be valuable for other people to pursue that.
Absolutely. They have changed the program a little bit since I was a part of it. And I'll editorialize here. I will say they unfortunately changed the program a little bit. When I was doing it, we had a great cohort, and it was split during the school year. You could take 1 or 2 classes, and then in the summer, for 2 summers in a row, you took 4 intensive classes over 4 weeks. And we got to be in Laos, Switzerland, to take these classes with a spectacular view out onto the mountains. And again, I'll say, unfortunately, I still think it's a great option, but they have switched it to all online. And obviously that makes sense during COVID, but it's a decision that the school made before that. And I have deep connection. We still reach out to each other with questions from our cohort. And I think that will be missing with an online only approach. I think it's going to be missing that in-person connection that happened over those 4 weeks. Nonetheless, it is in my opinion, an affordable option to get your master's degree. Along with the change to online only, though, it did turn into kind of a more general sports administration. It is still, I believe, through the School of Education there. But when it was that hybrid in-person and online, it was a really strong focus on international education. And they were very responsive to some of our requests. Some of our instructors were athletics directors with experience internationally. Kirby Boychuk from the Anglo-American School. He did our last course. He was the instructor for that. So it had ties to the international school role. I think some of that has gone away. It's still a great program. I would still recommend you looking into it, but the focus on international school athletics administration has probably faded away a little bit since my cohort went through it.
Yeah, we actually had Kirby on the podcast a few episodes ago, and it's just amazing how much knowledge that guy has. He knows so much.
It was awesome to have a week of just him sharing that. He gave us ideas. He shared resources. It was an incredible learning opportunity, not just from him, but the varied experiences within the cohort.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what we're trying to do with this in our own unique way, is just reach out to people that have interesting stories and share them. And, you never know who's going to connect with that and take something from it. Our talk has been mostly about your new role and, a little bit about athletics, but that can happen to an athletic director. Like you said, we see things in a particular lens, and that's often very beneficial to a school. I think we're getting towards the end of our interview. So just a final question from me. I'm not sure if Jeff has one more or not. You mentioned you're going to do an Ironman. What are some of your goals for your Ironman? What are you hoping with that? Is it just to finish, or do you have some times you want to hit?
I had the same question, CD, so that's perfect.
Let's clarify. It's a half Ironman, not a full Ironman. Full respect to anyone that can take on that challenge. Training for a half has just about killed me, and I can't imagine giving even more time over to it. I am a solid swimmer. I swam in college. I'm confident on that. I was a cyclist long before I got this crazy idea. I am not a runner. My goal is to make it across the finish line. Somewhere, and you can hold me to this, I do have hopes of finishing in under 6 hours, but I will be happy with a finisher medal.
That's awesome. Well, we wish you the best.
6 hours. Yeah, we just had an alumni on the podcast, Matt, former alumni from our school, from my school, who finished the Ironman, half Ironman right now, Chanti, and yeah, so cool. He was not active at all when he came here, and he changed his whole mindset, and he's doing Ironmans. I think he finished the Melbourne one, CD. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, awesome. It's incredible. Matt, I think we're at the end. Thank you so much for your time. We always writing things down. We have a little sheet of stuff, and I've been already writing some stuff down that we can take away from you. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on, and thank you for sharing all your best practices. And I hope tons of people will learn from this. I'm sure we do. We have some stuff, CD, that we have written down and we're going to use. So thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity, and look forward to learning from future guests of the podcast as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks a lot. And definitely good luck in your new role. And hopefully things come back to normal sooner or later for you guys.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, Matt.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we just got done with Matt. We had a great interview. We had a good chat before and after we hit record as well. So it's always good to chat with these guys and just pick their brain even a little bit more. What really stuck out to me in the interview is just a lot of the things he said about his role and how what we do as an athletic director does translate into other positions, whether it's admin or just being valuable to a school, being able to see things through a certain lens, and seeing how do things work and how do things get organized in a way that makes sense. Where are people going to be? Well, who's going to do what? Who's going to be where at what times? And making that all work is definitely a skill that I don't know if I've ever really realized that I have, but just from being an AD, you develop it naturally.
Right. And like he was talking, like seeing things through a different lens than head of primary, head of secondary, someone else, right? And I think we all have that as ADs. You grow into that, the better you get at the job. But you always, I'm sitting sometimes in these meetings too, right? And they talk about stuff, and I always think different about, or I have a different angle. No, these facilities are full, or the kids are there, or this is happening, or that's happening. So an AD role is very versatile, and it's actually a great step up if you want to go to an administrator position, because those skills really transfer. he mentioned the organizational. We've been talking about that with multiple ADs. The organization is actually number one. You can plan ahead like Ken Su for 3-4 months. That's also an option, but being organized and use your skill set because you have those skills and use them to make the school better because you have so much to offer. So yeah, that's again a great point from Matt. And that's something that stick to me too, CD. So it was great.
Yeah, and just his willingness to get creative, rethinking the schedule, rethinking how they're going to do things. I couldn't imagine some of the conversations I'd have to have with my admin to say, take this whole day off the timetable. And,
right.
You definitely have to be organized and have a plan for it. And it seems like they do. And I hope it works out well for them because that's,
it's pretty bold, right? It's pretty bold
definitely.
to do that. And,
Definitely.
and also like he was talking that the support of the parents is very important, but COVID gave us an opportunity to do things differently. So if you haven't taken that opportunity to do something new, you've missed out. And for them to be creative, having 2 hours for project-based learning or take time away from the meeting schedule to do other stuff with the students, that's pretty cool, pretty bold move. And I hope it works out for them. And I think it's been going really well that they can keep doing that. And the conversation I would have, CD, would be the same. Not easy, I guess.
Yeah, definitely interesting conversations and problem solving that need to be done. But kudos to them.
Yeah, definitely. And we really wish Matt all the best. Hopefully sports get back next year so that he can go back to his core business, organizing activities and athletics. But he seems to be very comfortable in the new role. It's also challenging, right? It's nice to hop into a new position because I think ADs can do that. They're so transferable. So we wish him all the best in that. And we want to thank him for being on a podcast today. One of the last episodes we're having for this season. And we tackled almost every country in Asia, which is remarkable. And so it's great to have Matt as kind of our finisher, last episodes of the year. So thank you, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. And make sure you like and subscribe. We appreciate all you listening, whether you're an AD or just somebody involved in the world of sports that likes listening to us talk to people. So don't forget to like and subscribe. That way, when we start up next season, you'll catch those episodes as soon as they come out. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.